The ocean of cyclic existence perturbed by the waves of aging, sickness, and death. This ground anointed with perfume, flowers strewn Mount Meru, moorland, sun, and moon. Imagined as a Buddha land and offered to you, may all beings enjoy this pure land. Venerable holy gurus, in the space of your truth body, from billowing clouds of your wisdom and love, let fall the rain of the profound and extensive Dharma, in whatever form is suitable for subduing sentient beings. Idam Guru Ratna I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings. I take refuge until I have awakened in the Buddhas, the Dharma, and the Sangha. By the merit I create by listening to the Dharma, I will attain Buddhahood in order to benefit all sentient beings.
Yeah.
第三个，
举手啊！
第三个，
妈呀！他考虑少点点。我的，等下集中个把钱别送来了吧？新年年中没接等没钱送的吧？新年个让就叫我当那边缺钱的叫我去玩的多。因为个新年叫我起码的，你话一到等着了说我叫我年把钱没叫我了说说了等没钱是，等最少当那年送了叫我们身体里啊。每个就帮给我就种的吃药不吃的，这不是在上面什么啥？叫我俺们上面这不做出来小东西呢？今天吃菜我都吃不皮我了，说不给我们不上面什么啥？所以说等几个的话，他叫我去嘛，俺说了那给什么什么啥去？我等的等给买把送过了，六开给买把送过了。新年年中没去等没去，等几个工作什么东西的。年送个买几百钱，年送个几百来900个，你把这数了要的是那数了，这几个工作什么东西是，三节工作、七工作、跟着工作什么东西把这是过了，这几个工作什么东西，这些监督性都担保的，这立着年把没把着，这说啥，监监的工作什么个头个的是，这说啥工作什么了。점로대 템보코 그래서 그러도 tenji kyo kunjo sumdo ngeyese jigla kyo chenge de kunjo sumdo ngebar ma to tile shen jibwa le kyongge che kyo thongge yo ma re song yo ra de che kyamru shin de tamba de so de zo le kyapsun ro go re se kyapchö go re se rang ge ne kyapchö ro de che kyamru shin de tamba so sangye le kyapten babo chö le kyamwe kintu kyapchö ben da ro so le tamba so le ko ne ane capture gore songara tiji camdushin Tambata, they love Yamba members. Capson Roa, some Jimbe Shoba, Capson Roa, loves a car. Sanjay Capson Roa, and Sanjay Lamle Shandu Tange, Lam Shandu Tange, Tambashalia, and then Yishimeshivaroa. Tambashan, Lao Jula Sobat and Caps Meshuater. Chula Capsona. Simjana Sawapambala Sobarwa. Chudi Kamutimba. Teni Kindula Capsona, Captuven, Dato di Kinduli Chokua. Kamiyata Chesa, or Konjukande Choya Wichito, or Nantende Chegu Samsa, Rogba, or Ketchetesa, Big Vitasa, or the Songiordo. Jelapsan Yamba Meber Chas, or I teach you. Yeah, good.
So here, to begin with, as Je Lama Tsongkhapa has taught in his abbreviated Lam Rim, you are unsure about your birth in the unfortunate realms after death. So after we die, according to Buddhists, as we accept past and future lives, you are going to have to take a future rebirth. And without the sort of confidence that can come through practice, we don't have any kind of certainty, any kind of confidence that we are not going to be born in the lower realms as a hell being, a hungry ghost, or an animal. We can't necessarily have confidence thinking, if we haven't, say, done practice like things like prostrations and offerings and so forth, and purified those kinds of negativities that we have committed in our past lives. That's the only way to sort of develop confidence. So it continues saying, and certain that the three jewels are the protectors from this terror. So we need to develop this kind of confidence, this kind of certainty in the three jewels as being that which can protect us from the lower realms, the only thing that can really protect us from the lower realms. And so it says, so make your practice of refuge firm, recognizing that really the only place that we can put our confidence or sort of put our trust in are the three jewels. There's no other sort of protector. There's no one else that can save us from the terror of that uncertainty about our future rebirth. And so here, to go for refuge means recognizing the Buddha as the teacher, the one who teaches the kind of precepts that we should follow, the Dharma as being the actual kind of protector, and the Sangha as being those sorts of friends or companions along the way, those that help us in our practice. And so in terms of what it is that are the precepts, this continues in this verse saying, so we should make our practice of refuge firm, stable, and not let the precepts of your refuge weaken. So to sort of take up the precepts, once we have put our confidence, our sense of protection in these three jewels, it means then that we follow certain precepts. Once we have taken refuge in the Buddha, for example, we don't seek out refuge or protection from other sorts of, say, worldly gods like Brahma and so forth. And as far as the sort of precept regarding the Dharma, we abandon harming other sentient beings. We engage in a way that accords with the Dharma. And going for refuge to the Sangha means looking to them as one's friends, as one's companions, those that you can ask questions to, those that are sort of your inspiration and those that you are trying to emulate. So in this way, one should have this kind of stable refuge based upon this sort of understanding in order to deal with that kind of terror of not having certainty about where we will be born after our death.
Oh yeah. 신행에도 매지도에 신행에도 매지도에 지급 군조 숨동에셔라 낭바전에 군조 숨샤고도 군조 숨샤야 될 거라서는 창만지된 게 제법들이야 군조 숨에 원도잖아 근데 군조 숨 용신에요 말어 군조 지기서로 마도 강가 숨게 숨면다지 용해요 말도 된데 말어 낭바전에 군조 써야 돼 대인지교 군조 숨동에서 캡tain 바보직 타르신 바라를 냠요 영경에 캡tain 바보 지 산제로와 디 캡tain 바보 근데지 거르마도 지 캡tain 바보면은 소소랑도 지신도 마도 캡tain 바보 산제스 캡무에 쳐세 되게 송배 쳐대 소소 두개 들어와 캡tain 다로스 숨도와 저저 캡tain 바보 산제레스 산제기 캡tain 바보 송네 산제기 캡tain 바나시 아니 게 쳐도 조빈이 서지라 긴데데요 산제기 때문에 쳐도 두로게 저 정보 정보치바 미비야다 시스데 긴디 군조 최신다 좀 게트졸이야 최수시들 루트졸 땡기네 삼타체 로 당원의 최군조대 랑게 소소 냠솔라야 되로 소소 제고야 돼 뒤조들에도 겸무에도 최군조인 쓰기도 저저 고산계게 급수대 군조섬을 교부리에서 군조섬 로스샤테네 대결한 제시로 주세 제바보글이야 이시전에 겸루단테 내시려면도 대칸데르스나 겹등바보 산계시 겹주변다로 견되지 경원에대 최대로와 다 산계다 최다 견되기 겹수대 간데르스 간데스 겹고여서나 대산계랑이 소고도와 시베 송의 죄제람년에 계좌 남라대세 시베 코아기 동해 죄제가 남과대 나랑그 냠선용의 신의 공승도 ken지세네 이 견조를 셔 요송거라 대신식 받던 바대세 대신식 받게 랑그 냠선용의 최대 샤라 셔야데 마도 아니 바 떡배 연대서 바 진시하고 직실로 보여한다고 텐데 메두송거라 디케라즈 테바체 삼바체 냠솔란데 소소 제고래 송고도와 시베 송을 조절로 년이 계좌 남라대 대신식 받던 바데 계좌 남기 자고서서 선계 겹던 바보래세 되네시 카메라다 제세데 긴데디 겹트베타 데 최대래 디케라즈 제고래 디 겹트고래 송고도와 어디인데 대인지 교권주 숨동해서야 돼 낭벨로로 군주 섬용당테 직계 전부도와 겹던 바보 되게 땜배 겹때 주변 다로 숨부차네 군주 숨샤고 얼마도 직dengi 제바보 되게 마고르베 바르데 시대서 고성 고마서
단다 거기
가르세다
인터넷 티스 차파라와 야 단다 거기 인터넷 티스 독자 예설
다시 데 고도 코메다 된다
쉐도 거기
아니
고성.
그러네 그래
No. So here, as this verse by Jelama Tsongkhapa says,
parte kujomeche nada dessa
as it says here in this verse by Jelama Tsongkhapa, you are unsure about your rebirth or about your birth in the unfortunate realms after death, and certain that the three jewels are the protectors from this terror. So for Buddhists, the three jewels are the certain kind of protector. These are really the only refuge from the kind of terror of continued rebirth within samsara. And so here it's not like those sorts of theistic religions where there is some kind of single protector, single deity or someone that one would go to seeking out protection, like asking for some sort kind of protection from them. But here, the Buddhas, the way in which the three jewels act as our refuge, act as our protectors, is the Buddha is the one who teaches the Dharma. Without them, without the teachings of the Buddha, we can't protect ourselves. But the instructions, the Dharma that the Buddha teaches is the actual refuge. Our own practice is really what protects us from the kind of terror of, say, uncertainty about our future rebirth. And then those that act accordingly, the Sangha, those are like our sort of guides or our inspiration, our companions upon the path. And so in this way, having this kind of confidence, making our practice of refuge firm, means relying on the three jewels in this way, of seeing that the Dharma, our own practice, is really that which is the actual refuge. We can't sort of place our confidence in another being, a creator, or someone else who we can just make supplication to and they will then protect us. But rather it is basically up to us, as the Buddha himself has explained in a sutra, that he teaches the kind of path that cuts the misery of samsara. But it is up to us to actually put it into practice. The path that extricates us from the sufferings of samsara, the Tathagata has given us this path, has taught taught this path. But the Buddha can't transfer his realizations to others, can't give those realizations to others. Rather, we have to do for ourselves. It is by implementing the teachings of the Buddha that we are able to go for refuge or really protect ourselves. So here, again, as this verse by Jilama Tsongkhapa has said, we should in this way recognize that the way in which the three jewels are a source of protection is by our own implementation of those practices, seeing the Buddha as the teacher, the Dharma as the actual refuge, and the Sangha as those kinds of companions or guides along the way, whose behavior we want to follow and try to emulate ourselves.
Oh, yeah. Oh, this one's a castle. Chitanaku, Jitan Chebabu, Gawando Sheba in a Kunjo, the Captain Babu, member Shara. Chebabu in Be want to Sheba in a good Chimado Yoshing Mara, Captain Babu, Carsore, Chebabu Chimado Yoshing Mara. Dinah Chebabu don't get to Inaya, so Logi, Chebabu, lost in the Ura. So Logi, Chulu, so Logi, Chebabu Tege, Cheba in a Jitan Young Dog. Nichu jinjik de sangma kongi lo yo ngondu tani chekura. Tene chulu shenda to zoe kongi lo yo ngondu tani chekura. Tene sangma kunjo kongba kichene tukugura. Tene sangma la kushepche kongi sangma kunjo ke jobare sam keling kongi shora. Tene ti keling bandwa. Sosi chibabuchi yobache shenda chulu di yampe meeting baraba chik taro chik alamda. Tragesuru songe mambudo tingsangaron siena chulura chik chilia. Yakote yoma shere chira jiren cheba ngone kelingena. Jiren cheba soso cheba bode soro paju chulutia kongo kongba yone kongo tumbara. Kongbe na yora. Tina ngarazo ne kunjo kale kongba tsiche te keling kora. Tende mendo asezonko. Chebabu chimado yo mare, chulu soso chebabu medra redishana, tinde, sama chebabu rig mardo. Odinde, tatandanga share karishausana. Kunjo sumdung es, kunjo sum sede, nangbe kemne tardu, roa sanje kunjo, dewyore, sanje shagetuba chibu mare, sanje trangmeban dewyore. Sanje trangmeban jiden kamli yore. Nangba tawade ngaranzo ya sanje toya yibachi. Sanje chumdende ya tangbo ngaranzo na shinche. Ani ya chutuni ya sangbo tan shingi ne ya sangro chene tarshimba gyure des. Tate lamga de nganzul tene ngaranzo ya sanje ya yoba. Dongele tarwa chiya yoba. Nganzo kyuji shirab tarshimba. Langdur yine tamji shingengi shirab langyur kyu yoba. Ngazo gyoji samba te samba sangbo dagwe shen cheba serape soso le shen kechiwa shen ke tanda tuwe te soso tanda yin samsa o tende tabda shirabdi sambo gachembo gyuriya yubachi yichi chene tichigdwa ngaranzo dagbari shi kwa kor shi te ane kunjo jiden cheba bolya soa tab chi tengechi marwa nangba chena ngaranzo sanje kerang zeba nashin chi sulobgi Yandru to watching is it and chone jam doa, Captain Babo Sanje, Captain Truvendado, Kinde, Jam with the church and I Chandishania, Remji, Sanje Yukoma to watching is it. Nambeta or the Odira, Simjan Tamjel, Sanje Rigusera. Sanje Tamje, Tamaba Yori, Tezukanga, Tambung, Sanje Yamar, Nambelula, Kalegamnia Sanje Udamato, Rangshingi. Rangzungi sanje chi yomardo. Oti de ngarazo sanje yoba. Oti chane kunjo sumla kapsun ro chutinge tunga tina shi chigese. Oti yongdo ya.
So here, when it comes to sort of generally, when you have a religion that posits a creator kind of a deity, some sort of single creator, whoever it may be, and each individual sort of theistic system has its own creator that it asserts. So if it is the case, as these various traditions assert, that an individual creator made everything, made all of the world, then that creator must too, whoever is posited in that particular system, have created these other religions. And so it would seem then that it would be logical to have respect for all of those different traditions if they are all preceded by the sort of intention of that kind of creator. Then it would be the case that each tradition would have respect for the others, recognizing that it too is a product of the kind of intention or thought of that creator. But that's really not the case. We see that there are sort of discord and fighting among these different systems and a lack of respect. Whereas when it comes to sort of if you are really following that the creator created all of those things, one should have respect for all of it. As opposed to that, the Buddhist system would say that there is no sort of single creator, and there isn't even just one single Buddha. Finding certainty, again, in the three jewels as the protectors from the terror of the lower realms and the terrors of samsara, Buddhists assert that there have not just been one historical Buddha Shakyamuni, but there are actually countless Buddhas. In fact, each of us has the potential to become a Buddha ourselves. By following the kind of teachings that the Buddha has given, we too have the potential to be able to develop the kind of wisdom that we already have within our continuum to its fullest potential, to become fully enlightened Buddhas. And so it is based upon our own kind of training in certain qualities, like valuing others more than ourselves, by developing our method and as well as our own wisdom and bringing them to their culmination, bringing them to their completion. We too are able to become Buddhas. So here it is the case that the Buddha began just like us and traversed the same kind of path, and based upon his own experience then gave teachings. So we too, if we sequentially train in those various trainings, have the ability, have the capacity to become Buddhas. It's asserted that all sentient beings have this sort of Buddha nature, have the capacity or the ability, and it's really dependent upon their own effort that then they can become fully enlightened Buddhas. So this is the kind of understanding of the nature of the three jewels of refuge, how they actually act to protect us and our own sort of capacity, such that we gain a kind of sense of going for refuge really means engaging in the trainings ourselves, following after that same path that the Buddha has taken in order to be our own kind of protector.
Oh yeah. Dene tar kar sore. Tiche jamdu shindu temba ta te lapcha nyamba meba cha sherwa. Tiche jamdu shindu. Da dan de mashi lapsa swa. Da chidan ko nangba chena sanje kwen kun se yende kun de ki kibu chang meba yordo. Sanje shagya tuba chibu mare. Tanda sanje shagya tuba de zambulin de le pene. Sanje gan jaban zenge de che song tanda kong che ne de yo zang zu tanda sanje shagya tuba zo che ji she yordo ma do chi dan sanje li a chang me ba de kamne thar do ba chang me ba de ti na kamne khande chi na sanje chom de de na da shanda khande chi na che ba bo ke le gi omar ma do kamne kunjo ke me le ba tin de ma ro kunjo yo de thar chi be ki bu ma bu yo de ina de che ba bo che zo kurang ge che ba bo yin ba she kunlong guange nichu kinchi de kanga se ma do rang ko je tendo tendo stenge so de chimbo de kelenge omara o ti memba chene ka so ya gyuro chene sanjeta tokpa kone konde penetina ya gyuryo ba che samtan kamdu che yorno da kamdu labja le te labja nyamba me ba che labja mangbu yor tanga du she ma ko che sanjele captain babo sonde Titi Kagali in the Temple Mabuyo, not Captain Babu, Tenship, Mabuyo. Tinane, Sanjele capture in say. I shan't kept Monsieur School. And surely kept a song and in the Kasare. Simjan let Sawabang bars. Surely kept on the Simjan let Sawabang. Sawabang and getting Alia, never Pamba Chibu Sigumare. Temper to Batia, Sawabang Bandu. Tanda chotam je tradition sawapang badel do yare donation mesewas dina sungudo shikebekos donation mesewa tishinshigwa nam yusung so do deshana shosede simjan la chawa mecheba 펜바 주바데다 처음에서 펜바 주바데 처음에 날도로 펜도 지고라 저 지고 말와 도나 춘이 메시와 티시시만 남지 송스 동네 양엔 대바데 데니 띵이 바시고서도 아니 지데 가르스도 먼저 고반 주베일 돈달이야 저 방배 쉬듯이 내래 타르베 고반 주베텔이야 동반이 공고래 송거라 도나촌이 메시와 티시와나서 동네 양엔 대바데 동반이 공배데 녀모래 용선 대니야 동해 탐절이 용선 대배 타브라토야 그 탑디 동반이 공고래 송거라 저와 메시바삼 상부sam기 되고 말했어 시럽이 차도 그래서 동네 양엔 대바데 데니 띵이 바시고서 어때 추세야 띵이래 지금도 라미 고반 부숨 속바지 주베가 추시와래 지데 동해에 땐도 타르바 라란다시 탐제 동해에 타르바 주시게 탑시 어디 ene 동반이 또 시럽들이 있던다 탑 개버지 잠반이지 장주기 삼라 쏘고 시럽 개버지 동반이 또 발라 쏘고 또 되닐 땜베 람데 콤발레 때는 야트고 요르도 야 뒤지소
So here, again, this verse reads, so make your practice of refuge firm and let not the precepts of your refuge weaken. So again, it is dependent upon our own kind of understanding and our own sort of practice that we are able to find refuge. So again, there is a Buddha, a being who has removed all faults and developed all good qualities. This Buddha Shakyamuni, who came and taught the Dharma, and his teachings still remain. And so we sort of center or make central Buddha Shakyamuni, but he is not the only Buddha by any means. There are countless Buddhas. There are countless beings who have perfected their wisdom and methods such that they have removed all faults and developed all good qualities. But no one made them that way. It wasn't sort of created by this kind of creator deity, and nor was our suffering or our cycling within samsara the sort of result of a creator deity. So neither our freedom nor our cycling or being in this kind of situation of samsara are due to the kind of intention of some kind of creator. So again, the Buddha is a refuge not in being able to just directly remove our suffering or give us happiness, but rather the Buddha is the teacher. It is by seeking protection in the instructions, the precepts, the teachings that he gives, that we ourselves are able to be freed from, again, the kind of sufferings of the lower realms and attain a sort of liberation. So here, again, just sort of the precepts that are related to going for refuge are many. We won't go through all of them. But again, the Buddha, seeing the Buddha as the teacher means that we're not going to seek out any other kind of teacher, any other sort of protection. Again, in India, there would have been many different types of teachers, but accepting the teachings of the Buddha as being the real sort of truth. And then based upon that, we engage with the Dharma. And the main precept of the Dharma is to abandon harming others. Now here, it's not just about like not harming, but really encompassing that idea of bringing benefit to others. So here there is a verse from Aryadeva's 400 verses in which he sort of summarizes the Dharma, what it contains, saying that it's really about not harming others, which includes wanting to benefit them. And then there's a side of emptiness that brings nirvana, that brings this kind of definite goodness of freedom from samsara. And there's no Dharma other than those two. So here, in order to be able to protect ourselves from the lower realms, there is that kind of Dharma of not harming others, of engaging in beneficial activities such that we avoid any kind of rebirth in the lower realms. And then there is the sort of wisdom, the development of an understanding of emptiness, which can bring liberation, which can bring freedom from samsara, that kind of level of definite good where we are able to pass beyond all of our suffering and all of our afflictions and so forth. But really, essentially, the basic precepts of the Dharma are these two. Here it is this, on one hand, the side of non-harm, of bringing benefit to others, that method side, the sort of special methods include things like love and compassion and so forth, as well as the kind of emptiness side, that wisdom by which we are able to be completely freed and attain the definite goodness of liberation.
Oh yeah, that they are gonna learn to live some night. 랑도르 추시 줍라 라레서 송고도와 디인데 고 전다베 조도 소소를 라레 그래서 대 까나랜데 레슨 나부 레스도 티고 미게와 로아 시안라 세베르스케바 다 미게와다 그래서 수가 나부 레스 까르부 레스도 게와 줄에 쏘고 대서 송고도 아니 잠반이지 찬지고 semla 쏘고 게와 야가 정말 세초거든 디인데 디안 까나랜데 렉삼네스 레 내손을 쏘고 깨지 둥에 깨지 그 나글레 칸칸임바 티야 보지 심바시 티주파 빵 아니 까르벨레 개와 카림바 티야 보지 심바시 산지 송샤베 대소 레레레네 파투 로아 어쩐다 단단 가지고 소소 그 나를 빵이 유나 티빵 바테다 연대 나를 끼기 유나 거 깨바티니 아니야 사로 따네 야르게 공대야 빼네 아니 타르바 타고요라 만돌라미 코바티 타고레 타르바티 타고레 산지 코바티 타고요라 어디 대야 까나레데 레삼나 란도 추시 줄라라레서 나글레데 까 코아케치 그 나글레다 녀몰라 소바테즈 바림 지림게 노르다 네 게벨레로와 생기 소교발라 소바 대주야 공대 앞에 잠반이 chanju semla soba shembege sem 디chen 단단 알아 소리에 견나를 빠 연된 날이 야 깨버티 공대 야 사네 아니 공대 야 빼네 아니 원돌람에 고마 타르바 탐제 캠버토베 고마 바도야 트토바 체고레스 소소를 알레 그레스 송도 디야 까나레데 렉섬네 랑도르 추시 투블라 알레소스 소소 랑도 체바틀 알레 그레스 딘 도나라 마부송도 당이 다근 거에 대신 수신 건데 소소 경견데 소소 제고를 다 송도 마도 현다지 교구리 삼야 로케샤 지부 경견 겹통게 지는데 교구르와 수이나 대토에 매도 소소 알레 그레스 저 당이 다근 거에 대신 수신 건데 주르스 레당 엠바체발 당이 다가 방보이스 소소소소 방보체도 바스고 네 레데 야부치마도 아섬 디 야부체서 사사테 방보 미치요나 네 그런 데리아 레가 야상부체는 뭐도 엠바체토고 마도 코 따땡게 지요나 소소 방보 소소 제고를 샨다 당게 그거 말을 섬고야라 어디인지 가서 당이 다근 거에 대신 수신 건데 레당 엠바체발 당이 다가 방보이스
So the main point here, as the verse continues, is that this depends, this kind of refuge depends on the correct practice of actions to be adopted or discarded. So by considering well the causality of black and white karmas. So here, this really means that our finding refuge, finding protection in the three jewels is mainly dependent upon us. Abandoning by considering the kind of correct practice of those actions that we should abandon. Any type of action that is harmful to others, that is negative, is something that is a black kind of karma. That is something that we should give up and make an effort not to do. And any type of white or positive actions are those that we should adopt. Things like love and compassion and bodhicitta and so forth. We are trying to develop those such that they are perfected or brought to their culmination. And so this really depends upon our considering the causality of black and white karmas. What are the causes of our suffering? What brings about our suffering? And what are those kinds of positive actions that we want to accomplish? And once we have that kind of knowledge, we have to make the effort for ourselves to take each good kind of quality, each good positive thing, and develop that to its fullest. And every sort of negative quality we try to get rid of, anything that's going to lead to a kind of bad cause in the future. So it is based upon our own understanding of what are the the kind of causes that will lead to a good rebirth as a human or a god, and what are the causes of negative rebirths, and are actually putting them into practice that we can really find refuge. That is where we find our protection. And we have to traverse this path ourselves. Again, this is really dependent upon you. It's not like a kind of system where one can rely upon a creator or look to someone else for protection. But as the Buddha has said in the sutras, the famously quoted verse, that you are your own sort of master or protector. We can't just place our confidence in another being to protect us or to give us some kind of realizations or protection, but rather it's dependent upon us, dependent upon our own actions, the good and bad that we have done, that we are going to experience good and bad results. So as this verse continues, it says again that as for the good and bad actions that we commit, we are our own witness. Like if we're doing some kind of work and someone is watching over us and they see whether we're making mistakes or not, we're probably going to be very careful to not make any sort of mistakes. And so too, we really are our primary witness as to those good and bad, those positive and negative actions that we do. We need to be the witness for ourselves in order to ensure that we are going to have good results. So here, the sort of manner of refuge is by really thinking about our own practice of actions. What are we doing in terms of adopting and abandoning certain actions? And we do so based upon an understanding of causality, of black and white karmas.
오야 된다. 오야 다 된다. 신의 년도 메지 댕메지서 당가란저 로아 천디자 많이 봐 교와 치마 편지에 된다. 시안라 소아 방아 진내지 펜바 주베고네 교와 치마 내송을 깨지 교가 원도라다 미 톱지기 교교와 주도 주 아니 교와 통만 매번에 사상경게 싹베로 너네 미교와라 소바테서 랑게 단단 메전베 세메바 망부사요도 대수 강가는 교바체 아니 잠바다 니지 장주기 섬라 소바 아다 어떤데 공네 띠바데 따야 탑시체 교황아마도 센델 사베 띠바 따베체도 심지안라 펜베 잠바자올라 소바 공네 아니 차샤와 쳐바 피와라 소바 교와라 쩌네 다 교와시마 마다 메솔라 마제네 다다 메리 교와치 다시 용그리 삼서 소소소소를 땡케바체 가르생에 내손을 깨지 교강가 봐 하다 메깨지 교만부 싸바 인삼사 다 telletene 교시망에 손을 떼게 그 말을 하다 메실래 교 토그레 삼사 소소소소 땡토바체 고야라 땡토바체 대사 많이 봐 땡주 하다 메 교와 규네 규디 교네 교와 규네 니 차당을 써봐라 딱초당 현조 공조당 아제 차당을 써봐 녀모 반에 ene tungele tendo tarwa chigi samsa kya ranchibu tungele tarwa sa mayimba sendi phame sembe rawa simje shen namja simje tamje simje le kebra meba simje kandechi na ya tawandole tunge medebe simje kandechi na tezu samma tamje tungele tarwa tapchigi sam dechedo ne sanje je koban toba chagi samsa takbe shen jibe chanju sem komneroa 내 산지에 고반 토바적인 섬 대체도 전형의 섬사 그런세 때문에 선발 쇼쇼 누르
So as this verse begins, you are unsure about your birth in the fortunate realms after death. We can't necessarily have confidence about where we will be reborn after we die. However, if we make an effort to stop the kind of causes of a bad rebirth by abandoning negative actions and also addressing those kinds of negativities, those kinds of non-virtues that we have accumulated in countless past lives, if we generate regret and make effort at purification as well as effort at developing those kinds of positive, virtuous qualities, making effort at every virtuous action and things like love and compassion and bodhicitta and so forth, we can have the kind of confidence, we can gain a kind of certainty that we will not be born in the lower realms, knowing that we have addressed those kinds of causes by purifying our negativities and accumulating positive actions. We can have certainty that we are going to be able to gain a good rebirth as a human or a god. And in that rebirth, be able to then continue to practice. But again, we should think that there's just gaining that kind of good rebirth in the future is not enough. But as so long as we have this sense of like I and mine, self and other, that we're going to continue to have to take rebirth within samsara. And so it's worth making an effort to try to get freed from that kind of attachment to oneself, this sort of grasping at a self that leads us to have that kind of attachment and aversion. And so too, we look then at other sentient beings and think that it's not just our own kind of freedom that we want to gain, but looking at all of these other sentient beings, these beings that have acted as mothers and fathers, they too should be freed from this kind of situation of suffering. Every single being, from the smallest bug, is such that they don't want to have to suffer even in the slightest, and they want to have happiness. And kind of looking at that situation, we should think that for the sake of being able to gain this state of Buddhahood, wherein I'm able to fully benefit these other suffering sentient beings, I'm now going to listen to the Dharma and put it into practice as much as I am able for that kind of purpose. So please set a good motivation then for listening to the teachings.
Oh yeah. 못하는 데 투기도야. 나야. 원래 당한테 뭐 주선도 하시는데. 다 두두기 수신해야 되는데요.
No.
두두기 수신해야 돼. 다 단도 공동가서 되게 땡진 제벌 중앙에서 팀만 보셔야 봐. 다 땡진 제벌 중앙에 뭐 시다데 뭐 보셔야 섬쳐. 땡진 제벌 중앙에서 쉐도자 교단 깨라 땡진 제벌 중앙에 자시 네버 손자 심지에 동해진 나로다 잠바다 니지 장주고 섬을 쏘고 탑지 차도서 연구여라 어전에 땡진 제벌 중앙 손자 랑원에 주바 동바레에서 최가리나 랑와도 주베 동바대 연구여라 저 탑대 실험 니가 돼 되고 주고여다 어디 조신구여도 땡진 제벌 중앙 손자 코 동해 요르 동해긴 나로와 요르 땡진 제벌 중에 심지에 요르 땡진 제벌 중에 산제 요르 로와 그래서 심지에 동해의 전도 인증지 전부 잠바 저와 장주 semla 소바테서 검고그래서 군주 템발레 템벨람지 초더라 어때나시 땡진 제벌 중에 손자 최가리나 라완도 두바치 요마르 랑긴고네 코란 찍히게 조조서 여버라친디 예시 찍을 근진치야시 요마르 마행게 다시만 보실 때는 뢰파 따네 대주 내가 제베들 따글라가 제버를 뒤르시 된대지 때네 딱 벗으면 샤고도 뒤주도 단단 뭐 동이 또 별로 되고도 탑신이데 주에 시다를 때진 레버는 중하데 된대 예배 라완도 주베 동바르 라완도 주베 동바서 때진 레버는 중에 수지 여버르시 어디만 보셔서 야 뒤지소요
So here, to pick up in the text, we will be starting from page 22, another way of establishing dependence. And here we have gone through so far how it is that, say, composite phenomena are dependently originated. Now here, when it comes to what dependent origination establishes, it actually helps us to sort of establish the method side, how it is that we are able to develop attitudes like love and compassion. What are the causes of suffering, and what is the sort of afflicted suffering that comes from that? So the kind of presentation of causally dependent phenomena, or things that arise due to dependent origination or dependently originated, this helps us to develop the method side of the path by looking at the kind of suffering situation of sentient beings and wanting to get them out of that, and also in order to develop love and compassion and so forth. This understanding of dependent origination helps establish that method side. But it also is important, is critical in terms of the wisdom side of the path, in that whatever is established dependently doesn't have some kind of autonomous existence from its own side. Phenomena are merely dependently designated, merely dependently originated. And so it is this understanding of dependent origination that actually helps us to develop the wisdom wisdom side as well. The wisdom, understanding that things lack this kind of inherent existence or this kind of sort of autonomous existence from their own side. So here, when it comes to dependent origination, it's sort of indispensable for both the method and the wisdom side of the path.
Oh yeah. 다 뚜르게 추시행시더라. 해진 제바보 인번에 해진 추진시다 니마 자강 명다들이와 살로서 왔다네네 부조스나 해진 스타셔거라. 추기 짐버르부터 땅에 겨만 보사네 부여 부지에 된다리라. 아니 된대전 총소나 아니야. 추진세를 명다수여라. 되서라. 다 다시 된두카리네 명태다 되서. 해진 제바보 인번에 고 내가 가르쳐 봐보이나. 신송계를 지나다, 남도 송계를 지나다, 매당계를 지나다, 매바시나다 가리나서라. 대지 제바 보인반에 레알 때네. 자와 강바 송계를 강바 소신구라. 강바 소에 자와들 때네 고 강소아래서 강소아 송자한테 지기질 때네 자와들 때네 제바 보샤 제바도 보더니 자와디 샤고래서라. 신주바 보르지네 신소 신주바 보스 제제 신주네 대제규랑 거신 자와를 때네 제바보샤고 그래서 펜지 자와다 제바보니 지실 때네 제바보차 그래 자와차 그래서 와라 제바보 매가지 자와용마로 자와 맞으니 제바보 정신마도 레제 제바보 등이를 때네 줍지서 자와들에서 와라 대 제바보를 때네 줍 그래서 일에 셴베 랑게 ngoyo tube tabshen melase cheba bosido ko chala matune rawadu tubara chida tende yo mares ora tene tuba mato rawadu tube sushen yo mares chebo lela tenje shes de tsawashiro ko sungdo cheba bode lela tene tenje ne cheba buchagres rawadu tube cheba bochi yo mares 레자 제부팅이 라테네 조마로 레데 제바볼토네 네차에 레샤르 마도 라와도 투바치 요마레스 거라 두베큐네 마통고 텔레션도 두베큐 요마레스 거라 체메 마통아레스 거라 오야 티치소 야
So here, beginning with another way of establishing dependence, it starts with Devadatta being a doer of an action is established in dependence upon the action he performs. Now here, Devadatta is a common name that is used, and it actually means sort of like given by the gods. So someone, if they sort of made prayers to receive a child and had a child, maybe they would give them this name, like given by God, but it could be any name. We don't need to have it be Devadatta. It could be Tashi or Tundrup or an even English name. But being the doer of an action is established in dependence upon the action that he performs. So when we think about someone, say, who is doing any kind of work, whether they're building a house or doing some sort of carpentry or any kind of like making medicine, whatever sort of action someone is doing, to posit that action or to posit them as an agent, these are mutually dependent. You can't posit a doer without a deed or an actor without an action. So the action is also established in dependence upon the doer. So you cannot posit some sort of a doer or an action that is autonomously established from their own side, but rather the deed is dependent upon the doer, and the doer is so too dependent upon the deed. There's no way to posit one of these as existing from their own side. So here, as the fundamental verses on the middle way by Nagarjuna says, the doer depends on the action. The action is dependent on the doer. Except for arising dependently, there is no other way that they are established. So again, whatever kind of action it might be, someone is building a house, you can't talk about the action of building a house without someone doing that action. So too, the sort of actor, someone acting as a doer, is dependent upon them engaging in a particular act. So these things are mutually dependent or mutually established. There's no way for them to, either of them, a doer or a deed, to be established autonomously or from their own side.
Oh yeah. That 대신도 양라다 양라전식도 양라선의 강보르진의 고다 개고 찍바다 사바 토다지 강배 차시만 보여라 대졸이 양라 세그와 양라 젠스도 강바들 세그라 속바들 세그라 양라다 양라젠 로 차다 차젠스 그래 차젠스도 강배 양라 도졸이 차스제 차젠스도 강바들 차젠스래 양라다 양라젠 차다 차젠스라 대신도 양라다 양라젠다세 차다 차젠을 속아서 세마다 셰자 이 대독배 세마 아니 세매 셰자서라 세마서 세매 셰자 세마다 셰자니 지지를 뜨는 샤고로 마도 세마매나 셰셰세지 샤용마도 셰어를 자와지요나 아니 세마샤도로 세마다 셰자 계제다 계제 교들의 계제로와 계제들은 제부스로와 제부대 교지요네 군 제부샤고라 제부지요네 교샤고로도 마도 시안을 때밤에 제 라와도 주베 대용 말해서 주베 수기 주베요 말해서 계제라서 봐 계제라서 자실라서 뭐 오메슈남서 대도 사마데 랑근고에 주바 말해서 편지 때네 주바 샤지 탐제 편지 때네 주바 바시르 송거라 때네 샤베 tinju도 텐도스 오야 티지
No. So here, when it comes to the existence of things like the whole and its parts, there are sort of different terms that are used here, but we could talk about like the branches of something, but usually in English we would use parts, but sort of like if you have like a house and the house is something that is made of all of these various parts, like the walls and the doors and the windows and so forth. These kinds of things. So sorry, the English and the Tibetan go in a slightly different order, but likewise, Madhyamaka texts, such as the fundamental verses, refute essential existence with respect to parts and wholes, objects of cognition and valid cognitions, producers and products, and so on. So again, there can't be, when it comes to like a whole, something that possesses parts, it can't essentially exist apart from those parts. Or two, an object of cognition. We can't have a existence of a valid cognition without its object of cognition. So these things are mutually or interdependently posited. So these texts, like fundamental verses by Nagarjuna, it essentially show us that there is no way to posit anything like something that is produced, a producer and product, the cause and effect, the parts and the wholes, an object of cognition and its a valid cognition of that. None of these can be posited as independent. They then reveal these things to be dependent arisings that are posited as interdependent or mutually dependent.
Oh yeah. 파리 수리다 보세요도. 다 린레치네 리퍼조디 롱바샤 수조디 리셔 롱바시요나. 아니 소설 때는 파조디를 파리시그라. 파조 미도도 아주 대세리들이야 수리시그라. 야 파조 수조세라. 리레치네 다 파리 수리시잖아. 리메나 그 파조세 수조세시그라. 수루 소소에서들 수조세. 파기 파조들시그라. 파리 수리다 보세요라. 파리를 때네 수리다 수리를 때네 파리 조지네시. 예바인베 펜지 때문에도 매라서 파리스야 될까도 이나 파리스요 말도. 나도 내 땡게 리치 파조데 리치네 되게 파리스라고 그래. 그런지 되게 땡게 되게 수리스 양아주 요새들 파리스라고 그래. 자고 또서 되중 조기 얼마도 파리스도 라와도 주바치요네 수때나 파리를 파리 삼사 땡고라. 뒤땡기면도 수리된 가지 요새 리디 라와도 주베 수리치네. 그 수때나 수리 삼고때 삼고면도 파조 땡게 수리 삼기와라. 자 뜨주브레서 로 딱딱하게 개발 직실 때는 주단 개발체 주고 얼마도 타치도 대인시 지코랑 라와도 주는 수주에 지와 말해서 거라. 탄예 좋은게 파샤네. 속바르실 때는 아니 삼을다는 파샤한 대삼을 고샤야 되어도 파리 수리다고 파리를 때네 수리를 때네 파리 여바 인진세 펜지 때문에도 매라서 레바테네 샤르 플로 노 장세나 소수님아 샤스 초된데 샤르와 파저된 로니아 노초된도라고 타치도 샤르데 가디네 샤조 되고 말와 네 샤초 인시 니마 샤서 초대 여버셔라 전에 그 버저들 때는 그 눕절이어라 근데 전에 때는 샤초서라 버저 때는 눕절된도라 자꾸 초스네 샤초 로조스네 버저 대서들 때는 샤나 샤초 타지도 샤초 인게지 지요 말아 타지도 눕절 인게지 요 말아 장초 로조스 소소소 가만히는 tel 때는 바샤우로 마도 라와도 드베 샤초 로조치 요나 그 수때는 디 샤초를 삼선 두고로 어떤데 주요 말을 쓴 시겨라 퍼리를 때는 수를 때는 퍼리죠 뭐 임베 펜지 때문에도 주봐요 말에서 셔누게 차다 다샤르노 장로 집어라 다셴라서 봐야 되던다 다세데 나라지 나라 다세라 삼거라 나세 현다가가 셴레서 견주 현다가가 셴레서라 다 버저도 저게 야서서서 나 삼거라 로자하게 나 삼거래 아니 버저도 가서 셴서 삼거라 나랑 나 삼에데 나라 집부 나 삼기도 나 삼번마도 나 라와도 두바시네 미션다 때네 갈때네 나 삼구로 삼구면도 때나 공부를 스토나 미스탄네 팀공부를 삼산 챙기도 이나시 갈때네 현다 참 심제 탐지기 셴 용구라 나랑 나 했다기도 현다를 셴했다기라 현다 삼마게 그래서서서 나 삼샀다기도 마도 나를 셴했다기라 나 세대 나라주 슈 겹지 삼기요르데 소수치부 삼기도 마도 현다 삼할 때도 셴해야돼도 자 라와도 두베 나치 요나는 나 라와도 두베시나 수때나 나를 때도 나나나 삼사 삼구도 삼기면도 셴 삼기도 세상코 로 왕게 당연히 왕게 샤기로 마도 유코랑 왜네 라와도 두바세지 나세지 라와도 두바시요나 네 수때나 때라 나오냐면 로게 그래 듣기면도 와서거라 다 강가 뜨도 그래 당연히 왕게 샤기요래 당연히 왕게 안에 가르쳐서 요 얘나 어디서 편지 때 내세 션우기 초다 다셴라 속봐야 대단달라서 매다 도와다부 주단 대부를 줘봐야 편지 때보다 다 대체 버와 매대 도에 주리에서도 그 도와지기 요사 도에 주샤고라 도와대 매 대부에서도 매 도와지기 요사 대부인 바샤고라 대부를 때네 주인 바샤고라 주인 발을 때네 대부기 베샤네 주인 바샤고라도 주단 대부 편지 때네 줘봐래 송거라 남경아 좀 대부 줄을 때 받을 강 창매시그라 주도 마 주디 대부를 때네 샤고르스티 셰그 마르신다게 거한데서다 대단들 매다 도와다 보야 주단 대부를 줘봐야 편지 때마다 매랑게 고 차시색 봐다 도에 주인 봐야 매고 차시색 봐다 도에 주인 봐다 색제 표시 지색네 그 매를 차시색 봐래 색제에서 샤고르도 색제 표시를 때네 색봐 샤고르 매샤고르 차시색 봐 매랑게 고 봐다 색제 표시를 때네 주바 마세 신야 표신세야 매를 때네 그 표신 샤고르에서 거라 매 가서래 주바 마세 표시야 멜레토니 주바를 조베세 데부 줄라 때바 마세 교양 데부라 때네 주바 텐주 로란 조고 소데라 데부 줄라 때바 때데 남주 상메 셰그라 단디 갑서 주대한 데부라 때네 주바레세 고 교양 바된 데부디 깨베 차네 주샤고 요라 어디 바데 치소 시바리르다가
So here, then again, there's this kind of mutual contingency that we can see. So they then reveal these things to be dependent arisings that are posited as interdependent or mutually dependent. For example, dependent on the far hill, we posit the near hill, and dependent upon the near hill, we posit the far hill. So here again, when we have like that mountain over there, and we don't even have to use mountain or hill. hill. It could just be over there and over here. These are things that are not intrinsically established as this is here and that is there, or like that is not always the far hill. It's contingent, it's dependent upon where we are when we are positing that. So if it were the case that something had that kind of autonomous existence as being, say, the far hill, then whoever would look at it, wherever they are, they would see it as the far hill. It would be identified as that. But that's not the way that it actually exists. It's the case that it instead depends upon where we are. So it says they exist interdependently, but do not exist otherwise as such. It is the same with east and west, self and other, and so forth. So here we might think that, well, like something like the directions are definitely sort of intrinsically established. The east is where the sun rises. But again, this depends upon where we are. There isn't one spot, one place that we can point to and say that is intrinsically autonomously east, or this is autonomously west, but rather it depends upon where we are. And so this, again, is the way that things are posited in this kind of contingent or mutually dependent, interdependent sort of way. So too it is with self and other. It is the case that we all, in relation to ourselves, like I as the translator think I, and I'm looking at you guys and think other. And so too, if it were the case that that thought of I were somehow that me were intrinsically autonomously established as that, then whoever saw that, whoever perceived that would have to think me or I. But we don't. Each individual thinks I in relation to themselves and then looks at others and thinks other. And that is something that is contingent, that is dependent upon our particular position. It's not like sort of something that is blue where whoever looks at it is like, oh yeah, that's blue. The idea of self and other is really dependent upon where we are. We don't look at another and think I, but we only think that in relation to ourselves. However, if it were the case that that were somehow autonomously, intrinsically, really, truly existent as an I, then whoever observed us would have to think I. So here it is, again, the case that things are mutually dependent, are mutually established by the force of designation. It's only by the force of designation that we can establish I or self and other. And so too, when it comes to establish such things as fire and smoke to be cause and effect is also done on the basis of their being mutually dependent. The fire's nature being hot and burning and its being the cause of smoke is established in dependence upon the fuel and smoke, respectively, just as firewood is established in dependence upon fire. So here it is the case that we say fire is the cause of smoke, and therefore they are dependently established in terms of cause and effect. But when it comes to the prasangika position, they would actually say that not only is the effect, say in this case the smoke, dependent upon the fire, but the cause itself, that fire, is dependent upon the smoke. It's this kind of mutual contingency or dependency is the nature of cause and effect. So therefore, the consequentialist prasangikas assert that not only is the effect dependent on its cause, but the cause is also just established in dependence upon its effect. So, for example, we can posit fire, something that is hot and burning, on the basis of firewood, on that kind of fuel, but we can only posit fuel if there is fire. So in that way, it's not just that the effect is dependent upon the cause, but the cause is actually established in relation to the effect. And this is a unique kind of assertion of the Prasangika school. 어, rinpoche nga kogi min du tanda. Shaba di segi na. tanda jison.
오야야. 다들 도래한 책세래서 나와줘 봐기로. 직세래 전달그디 송래 직세나래 근데 대체를 대달 체마실래 지dengi tendo ba number jo chema to jo shejal to chema shago de sura musum chema cheba chema long chema sera dawa la ten ya chi pamini palanda dawa sera chi double ten tende yamba boya de tende no da tunda chema de shejal to bude shejal de chema to bude 대다 그냥 편집 때문에 줘버리고 chema da yuna shejal da 동 교래 shejal da yuna chema da 동 교르게스 chemada sheje yung onyi ji trubani yoba maarese. Tadi chibura sama. Shetan Buddha Bali tali kyans. Lobi sanji kyang kirwa. Buddha Bali tali kyang. Mea baase. Pensi to bali. Pishin le tuni mea na mele tuni pishin shaku le songa shetan. Rinji chawan le kyang. Di yupen na di chung pese. Di yupen di chung se. Petelia. Rinbu yuna tongu sha tuure. 통우지는 teleto데 디르가 도스 릉부샤토라 지도서지면은 고 타지도 릉부임바치다 타지도 돈도임바치고 라와도 주바치 요 말을 거라 디베는 디중에 페텔 릉부요는 통우용구리에세 디케페는 디케페르세 디케베시는 디케베시레 마르메 예베웨시노서 마르메 케바데 텔레테네 외중구리에세 도서때 좀 셔지니 쪽구리에서 거라 아니 가래 조심해라. 주시라. 무슨 어디 시다서 어디 봐도 지도나.
No. So here then in Chandrakirti's Clear Words commentary to the fundamental verses on wisdom by Nagarjuna, he states that therefore the four valid cognitions establish knowledge of the world's objects. So here the kind of four valid cognitions, this is referring to direct perception, inference, sort of analogy and verbal renown or verbal testimony. There are sort of different ways of listing those. But those are dependent upon their object of knowledge, and so too that object of knowledge is dependent upon the valid cognition. So they too are interdependently established. Once valid cognitions exist, they have their objects of cognition. Once the objects of cognition exist, they have their valid cognitions. Both valid cognitions and object of cognition are not established by their own intrinsic essence, but rather they are mutually dependent, interdependent in this way. And so too, Buddha Palita's self-titled commentary says, it is like this. Due to interdependence, there is fire independence upon firewood, and there is firewood independence upon fire. So here again, getting at the idea that the cause is dependent upon the effect, and the effect in turn is also dependent upon the cause. And so too, from Nagarjuna's Precious Garland, it says, when this is, that arises. When, like short, when there is long. Due to the production of this, that is produced, like light from the production of a flame. So here, something like long or short that is intrinsically existent is impossible. Something isn't just sort of long in and of itself, singularly long or singularly short, but rather these are dependently designated kind of phenomena. When something is in relation to something else can be posited as long or can be posited as short. And so too, when it comes to the production of something, the effect arising from a particular cause, these are mutually dependent.
Oh yeah. Oh, 진짜. 단 도대발에 산재가 너 값서 송거도 칼라 롱된 잠불리 차단 샬로데 송거라. 칼라 롱데세 남과 동바시리아 아니 롱데 텔라 때네네 추위 풍부 좀 텔라 그러니까 텔라 사진되죠. 대 추위 풍부데 요할 때네 사진부데 좀 서라. 텔라 사진되데 텔라 로아데서 대 사도도 차서던 텔라 때네 로아치 심제 소자담니다. 던들어 서버 강가 연구하다. 대세 심제 레라 주베 주는 데다데스. 대수 상마데 용예가 주데 가르선 남과 동부 시그널이야. 사도도지 대셔요도 대수 강가데 심전기고 레레 때니 중요하래 송거라 심전 레레 주베 심전기 레게 왕고 코네지지데 롱체체데 주 Delia long job of Simpson the true ne, the Odung Herb Yanji there we are no. Oh, Simpson Lela Chube Juni did ready. Namga Kanla ne, 20 somebody yes. Leg Wangachi, Nubachi or Esticarasna, Namga Tongbachiga, Namka Tongbachina, Sato Don Zambul the charge there you are. Oh, did they leg Wange? Never you Badoko, and it's Sato the Tilitato Grace, Timana and the Coparujili should do this. Leg never also na. Namga Kanla ne, 20 somebody yes. They do the chair, and they Drebachidua, Daniam Dolos and the Chibaris. Love Sanga Sambo, Tiba Chustab and Drebachidua. Love Sanga Sambo. Tina Garrison Dosana. Color shades all us of some the color long dance there. Penanjik then Chagba, Nance, Rembashindo, 10 days, Chichilla, 10 days, Rembashin the trouble. Namgatong Batella, and the long thank you are. Long da cheba le ne chudi chui pongbu de yong yo rese tele ya sergin do ne chudi yo le tene sashi sergin do ja sa sebura chabi be kajir do sergin do ja ji sashi cha rese ora tele ya sachin bu ti ga ne sachin bu do kambu de cha rese tele ling shi be ji de cha de tele de sha cho lo jo no cho chang cho se je ko cho shi le ling shi cha rese do Tene Simjangi Longju Chatini, Simjangi Longjaya, Ravasaya, Tonya, Koyala Sobasone, Chito Longjane, Rimgia, Kangas, Jagi, Kanga Yongordo, Tene Rimgi, Longju Chadese, Tendra de Save Q lay in Bar Sheber Show, Save Cudico, Lela Tene, Kawangame, Le, Sentile, Legace, Chavachene, Lunga Yusungi, Chavachene, Chungu Yordo, Yarchin Tandangazu. Zambuli namle pichu wala me tongda mambo sere che kanga yongdo atu kanga kanzu rimbe severe sigora oh ya kaware simjengi lonchu cha dese tendra de sawe gyu le yimbar shebar chao se shendo nangwe tamje embe sengi che namga chitar nesyo se lela soba chi simjen dan drawachi mena Nangba Tongbatilya and the Nugin Jigdento Nea de condition net of Gresungora. Shendo Nangu Tamje Embe, Nubu Tamje Embe, Nangba Tongbatilsora, Tori Meba, Chara, Nanga Chiternes, you Sato de Yaten Saganelia, condition you rese. Lungi Kengu Kala Ne, this, Lung to Nego Nangba Tongba. Mega Meguso, she somebody Chine Jinjig de dancer. Tell a long cheba be chuji simjet namnese. No Jinjig then the long cheshera, long cheba about the simjetera. Thomas Chagbe doing in a pension, Tension Deva Yabata, pension, no Jinjig dandy, Simjagilla to Simjet, no Jinjig Latonia, any Ashine Chaguyono. Tata Miller software social nam or Dibado yeah.
No, no, so then from the Sutra of the Buddha, it says here, the first summary sutra states, again, this is the sort of description about how the world comes into being, in this description of the sort of production of the universe. It says here in this verse summary sutra, air depends on space, and the body of water depends on this air. The great earth depends on this water, and beings depend on the great earth. In this way, beings experience their karma. Consider how else would space serve as a base for something. So here in this sort of description of the way in which the universe comes in to beings, it describes that karma is really the fundamental root of all of this. It is due to the sort of karma of beings that the world, the environment that they enjoy, as well as they come about into being. But as it is explaining here, the sort of way in which these are contingent or dependent is then described in the Master Haribhadra's commentary on this verse summary sutra, where it explains, The verse states on space and so forth. For example, this universe evolves in stages that are dependent on each other. Air depends upon space. And so here, space is referring to that simple lack of obstructive contact. Air is then dependent upon that lack of obstructive contact. And then that too, the body of water depends upon air. And then the golden earth that is sort of considered the ground upon which our earth is based then depends upon that body of water. The great earth depends on the golden earth, and the world system comprised of the four continents is dependent upon the great earth. Then the resources of living beings form. So on that basis, we then develop up the rest of the world. We can sort of see how it is sequentially built up into the point where we get as living beings into our own sort of building up houses and structures and flying through the sky and all of these other different things that we do. And so this is all then again dependent upon the karma of beings. So consider how karma is the root cause of all of this. How else could space, defined as the absence of all things, so the absence of any kind of obstructive contact, serve as the base? What need is there to mention everything for which air is the basis? So here, in this way, everything is dependent in this sense of the way it is produced, but it's also dependently sort of designated or contingent in the sense that like the things that living beings enjoy, the environment and the sort of beings that are within the world are interdependent and interconnected, as it will continue to explain.
Oh, yeah, do matter. Tenzin she sung batara. Suji simje toma cha de dometa. Oh ya tandine malasa. Tata mila sobe soja nam sembur neba sedwa. Tandanga zu mila sobe soja tendula soba kanga. Zamlin dina neba do sembu che de sigara. Tata mila sobe soja nam sembur neba ya chinangi. Saju melongi namkata chebala tene chi ne jinji den di ko nangene sada chuda meda lungda namga tongsan la soba tezul tene ne sembuche te gu yore sungo sigora gasore buka namkata chebala tene buka namga su tongsan dil sigora tongba udan sagibo lungdo sebade sigora namga ngaju takba singe thore mesam bicha namga takba sitel sigora mara chinangi China Sachu Melon, Namgada Chebala Tene Jua, Yinla Ase. Tene Chuji Simpian Namne Nugin Jidela Tempata. Naranzo de la Long Chengenge, Meda Tendula Sabatazu Kangade, Nugin Jiden de la Tende or Resora. The Sada Chuda Meda Londa, Tongsan la Sabatazu Kuru Seurata, Kuru de Abuman Azuneto Yomara. What the Satana Chindio Mare, Neto Mare, Chandra Neto Mare, and the Lung to some man Neto Mare, Utan Dura. Oh, the Indico Chi Niji, Senada, Oda Tele, Kuru Tele, Tengres or. Tena Chuji Simjan Nam, the Nurgin Jiden de la Tempata. Nurgin Jiden Shembo de Chui Pungula Tempata, Chuni Lungi Pungula Tempata. Lone Tongsangi Namgala Temba Inshins, and then woman. Shusha or touching Temba dance. Touching Go Tamjegi, Dongbe, Dongsangi Namgala Temba Dini, Simjan Namje, Nebe, Sashida, Luda, Lonzola Soba, Tidu Nove, Novo Namje Tendo, Tu Namshiji Pato, Neba Yasa, Tandi Zambulin de Kazebado, Marazo, Midatondula Soba, Soya Tension, and Net Tobateasora, Simjan Namje Lela, Temba Indiesa. Young Messenger Lala Temba, Sendela Marazo. 제단 드림을 마부사제 쿠루 매버서야다 텐들레 땡기와라 템바인데 테다마이나 남관디 다다 롱라 속베네소 롱베 시리 지다른 교대 민주세 레단 드네 롱제바버 심젠테 쪽 레단 드와치 요네 얘네 단단디 내진지된데 그 롱제제가 실레네 되요래서라 대다 심젠남빌레네 니주진지된게 자외 교인바 송라사 남바체네 레레지데 나서 계스라 sembe le sange mambuji sa teletene susu longcheja tidu nyowe tenduya longcheja saya toya koya la sobatezu tuguyor no sembe namji le ne jinji ne sawe gyuyin ba sonde tena ende la range ngo namjo shen la de ba da sange pari tsuri la de ba sa ra tende do tende da se 개발을 시행할 때 봐서 디 뭐보다 깨와도 주다 깨를 때네 깨와도 텐들 셔도 때네 딱배 텐들세로 때네 깨배 텐들서 어딘데 남반이 나를 되는 좀 쉐그데 야 텐들 스티바도치 야 어떤다 집어서 저 고망지 랍셔나 그러면서 야
So here then again it says that living beings, thus the world's environment and the beings that use its resources have all been interdependent and interconnected right from the beginning of this world. At the present moment, too, the fact that all beings, humans and so on, are alive is dependent on the external and internal elements, earth, water, fire, air, empty space, and so forth. So living beings are dependent upon their environment. So too, all of the sort of elements that make up that kind of external environment, those internal and external environments. And the living beings that inhabit this world are dependent on this world's environment. The great earth that is a part of this world's environment depends on the body of water, which in turn depends on the great mass of air. And so in this way, all of these things are sort of mutually established or mutually dependent. This air then depends upon empty space, and the empty space, the mere absence of all things or any kind of obstructive contact, serves as the basis for the things that cause beings to experience happiness and suffering, their bodies, the earth, and its resources, and so on. So here, again, the sort of varieties of things that beings experience really ultimately arise from karma, but come into being in the world due to the force of that karma. So the period of time that it remains as such is dependent upon these beings' karma. If this were not true, the empty space of the present could not become a suitable basis for air, and so on. So this citation states that beings' karma is the root cause of the world's environment and its inhabitants. We've seen the often quoted verse from the Buddha, where he says that all of the varieties within the world arise from beings' karma. This kind of dependent origination is one in which the sort of all of the very world and its inhabitants, all of this environment is dependent upon that kind of empty space, that lack of obstructive contact for its coming into being. And so we can see that kind of level of dependence in terms of something acting as a cause for something else, as well as the kind of level of dependence of something being dependently designated. So as was discussed in this section, there's a sort of mutual dependent kind of dependency or interdependency, as well as that kind of dependent arising of imputing something and that level of dependent imputation.
강바리나 고대 개군데 토가나 지카리나 자세 좀 그래도 독제스도 로텔을 쓰여라 자다 디 강바리에서라 조시지 자대다 디 강바오냐베 로니들 자이 타녀다 로이 타녀스니 연구도 자 추남 dak시당 독제게 타녀를 때내서 독제게 타녀 독제를 때내 좁수스 티셰도와 최근대진에 다단데 대설류 장바 스텔트니 샤르마도셰 남둘라 속바로와 전에 강사다 니마이네 싱들 잔 배잔 셰도 싱더스데 콜로로 제제니 따제 미제티 땅니 루두산 제 싱더스 시니에스 요마도 다등사도 남두다 대설류 잔에 틀려자 레라도와 설륜 장반대에서 랑게 다 설륜 장반대에서 랑게 사변당 중앙 전부 시당 보가 남과 마타베 사변 요도 아니 중앙 전부 시세 사고래 추고래 롱고르도 주고르도 서주면은 중앙 전부 시세거라 사인 중앙 메인 중앙 추주 중앙 전부 시 시당 보가 남가서 동산야 계서 야 치료도 사자 동산 고요라 딜러 보가 남가서도 동바 소 유로장기 차셰 코네 그게 찌르래 샤도마 소바케 코키도사 사주 멜론 중앙 남과 동산다 제바테서 마무지를 떠진데 야께 그래서 가라 속바데 야께 그래서 그게 속바 마무리 때니 게 그래서 대다 설류 장바데 깨와나야고 차셰를 직장자 제바 네 설류 장바에서 직장자 깨요 말 골카도다 입다 에로아니 지티 차셰 마무요도 뒤에 마무요라 직장자 많이 봐 직장자 참미 직장자 현다 로봇 먹을 직장자지 대참미세라 시바케지 참미세라 때나시 참미 직장자 끼고 말해서 그 가도다 입다 뒤에 마무초네 되다 매다 마무요라 직장도 깨와 많이 봐서 지레베 초바 코나기 초바지 깨운 거래서 오라 된다에 초바차에 뒤레레와 다디 설류 장방고 등디 용게디 뒤레레레네 파세션은 디 장바에서 찍을 주고 쪼에게 요마도 근데 초바차에 뒤레레와다 초바다 가도다 입을 초바 찍을이야 디 요마다 초바를 때네 초바디 멤버 가르스네 초바를 때네 아니 디파 따고 요도 그게 마부지 초바를 때네 아니 디시레스 그나 낙세르지네 마부지 초바를 때네 디 낙세레스 간사로지네 풍부한 초바를 때네 디 미리세 파다고도 저 초바디르기요 말에 초바디 낚시레도 얼마도 딱셔래요 말에 예 설류 장바 말에서 초바디 많이 라서 차시에 대달에 마도베 아니 뭐 현대화 설류 장바 현다제 요마도 차시에도 파샤는 현다제 용식 말와 아니 설류 장바 매르스 매마르스로 대단하야 설류 장바 때다 매다 카도다 입다 되줄 때네 그 설류 장바에서 당부 사부 답에 선다 제바 되줄 때진 되네고 아니 설류 장바 스파다고도 때다 매다로 카도다 입이 차도마 남 딱실전에서 대시전에 디설류 장바에서 파다 그래서 다디나시 참아 뭐 강가치 보러 대싱도로 구슈 동보레서 데 암기 동보레서 강가 가르네들 당연도 배시 인신에서 설류 장바시 당연 딱바 대sam게 설류 장바 유주 조바레서 델 설류 장바레서 다가 다 추사를 당연도 유주도 다 제바체가요 말에 다 제바치게 되나 아니 단단바 투마투세 제바치거라 다도 데 마침 바 설류 장바 셰딱 베튼 설류 장바데 가인 셰체나 아니 다시나 차셰레 셴칸도 설류 장바시 니기요 말에서 오라 근데 아니 설류 장바랑게 차셰다 도체레 때네 주베 텐디레스 다도다 강가 치고라 달마부셰서서 게데 다시 차셰 가야 롱아시 설류 장바 인바시 니규요나스 디나네 데살류 장바레스 치 차셰로 치 라야 요나스 오라 아니 장바 다시단 도체레 때네 조마인 바렌도레 장바데 다시다 다시 차셰다 도체게 탕에 자다 도베 탕에 때네 주바 마르 코라 라와도 주바렌도레 다시 차 가야 살류 장바에 버시 니주 매장 자식이 다실에 때는 도시기 살륜 장바 오시 딱바 삼빈 장바 요바인베 자셰단 도시 라테네 살륜 장바 요라 자셰단 도시라 마덴버 살륜 장바 생게체 랑경오 랑오네 투바시니베 그 고급요 말이시거라 니주 매변 장바 댄신 대본 좋아니도 투바 어때보다 지주나
So here, then again, it says here, so turning to this section of how phenomena are established in dependence on their bases of imputation. So here, again, this sort of, when we could use any kind of example, but here in this sutra, we are using the example of a rice seedling. So the rice seedling is produced just from an aggregation of a variety of factors, composite causes and conditions that are constantly undergoing change. Its seed, the four great elements, the element of empty space, and so on. So any sort of phenomena, whether we could take the example of like a plane, or we could look at a person, or the sort of famous example that they liked to use before was like a chariot or something like sort of a carriage as it's translated here, then none of these things exist from their own side, but rather are a composite of causes and conditions that are constantly undergoing change. And so nothing can be found to be that sort of thing as it seems to exist. So it says here, when the rice seedling is produced, it is produced not as one singular thing, but only as an aggregation of various things. So when we have some sort of effect arise, it's not as though it's just a singularity, but rather it is something that is composed itself of various parts. And so the rice seedling, the individual parts and the aggregation are not the rice seedlings. And there is no other entity, there's no entity other than these parts that is the rice seedling. So basically, we have something that is a basis of imputation. Again, there are those sorts of schools that would assert that there is something that could be partless, like say some kind of idea of partless time, or like partless moments, or partless particles. But when we look within the individual parts of that rice seedling and the aggregation are not the rice seedling, but there's no other entity, or there's no entity other than these parts that we can designate as being the rice seedling. We nonetheless say this is a rice seedling, and we're imputing a conventional term on a basis of imputation that consists of different parts, such as the upper and lower halves, the color, and so forth. So this mere imputation of rice seedling encompasses the ontological status of the rice seedling. When we use our sort of the terminology, or the kind of concept that is behind a term, and posit it as being this mere imputation of rice seedling, that encompasses the entire ontological status, how that thing exists. Not content with just this, however, we search for that which is the rice seedling, the object of imputation of rice seedling. So when we do, we find no rice seedling that is the parts, the bases of imputation, or something other than the parts. Therefore, this rice seedling is a dependent arising that is established in dependence on its parts and on imputing terms and concepts. So here, when it comes to the way in which this rice seedling is established, we can say that there's no sort of, if we were to search within that basis of designation, there's something which has various sort of parts and components, an upper half, a lower half, there's a color, and so forth, and we try to find something that we can point to as being the actual kind of rice seedling. We can't find anything within, it's like all the way down to the individual sort of particles that exists as that rice seedling, but rather it's something that is merely designated upon a particular collection of causes and conditions. So too, like when it comes to anything else, like a forest, there's no sort of forest that exists in and of itself, or that is that basis of designation, like that collection of trees, but rather it is something that is designated on that basis. So here, this is something where if we are not sort of satisfied with whatever it is, whether it's a rice seedling or like an apple tree or a mango tree, and we try to say, well, we want to find the thing that really exists as that thing, there's nothing that can be pointed to. When we're not content with just the sort of imputation and the level of the imputation, we try to find that thing. But when we do, we find no rice seedling that is the parts, the bases of imputation, or something that is other than those parts. So again, the rice seedling is a dependent arising that is established in dependence on its parts and imputing terms and concepts.
그래서
Yusong.
나 되게 대다르 설린 장바세 다 대다르 설린 장바 랑게 차셔라 때네 주바 신도스가 랑게 차셔단 도질 때네 주고도 어때 나신이세 단 장바 코랑 그냥 차셔 카도다 입다 뜨다 매다 뜨수 뜨테르네 세게되는 뜨수랑원에 주고르스노 뜨수 찍바레세 뜨수 랑게 차셔라 때신 주기르마도 라와도 주바지 요마레세 카도나라 요마레 입나라 요마레 뜨다 매다 뜨테르르르 세테나 요마레세 라와도 주바 요마레세 장바랑게 차셔 뜨매다 카도 소냐 라랑게 차셔게 닥시다 도질라 때네 주바 인세 대다르 차치네세 네 타마 뒤터라 장베베 뒤터라 충주주르네 바닥제 치기나야 차셔던 도질라 때네 주바마도 차셔를 때메고네 주바시요 말에서 대다르 차치네 타마 뒤터라 진짜와시 이로스베 충주 따니라 랑게 뭐 내가 대세도 초 타데베 샤노서 뒤지 뭐 내가이나 샬로 노브ቻ라 서버코 지 뒤뒤체서나 지질리 팀메드와체 카가데토 지요고레세요라 뒤에 참미 지부 양가로와 니 미시바인세 뒤 로딜이야 뒤에 참미세고 말에 참미 요나네 라완도 주와치된 로고라 그 수치를 때뭐 그런 장장야 요토고라 지시르나 뒤 인천제랑게 닥시 차시 요고래 디메나 뒤에 뒤투스나니 찍버린도 그렇고 철철로 매신 잠불이 쌈토고 말해 인천제랑게 닥시 차토마탄 도체를 때네 죽고 봐 인세 되나 론데라 뒤에 참에 미세바야 뒤 인천제 대진 대바는 중앙 인구배 내게 tenjuelole tune chame yo mare sore ya ho tipo to chiguna
So here, sorry, I think I forgot a little bit of the English. If any one part of the basis of imputation were found to be the rice seedling itself, it would be incorrect to assert that the rice seedling arises independent on the basis of imputation and the imputing terms and concepts. However, none of the parts can be found to be the rice seedling, and yet the rice seedling does exist by mere imputation of rice seedling. By imputing the term and concept to the basis of its imputation, its parts. Therefore, the rice seedling exists in dependence on its parts and its imputing terms and concepts. We cannot identify the rice seedling as existing without depending on its parts and imputing terms and concepts. So we establish the rice seedling to be a dependent arising. So some of this covers the same kind of material again. So here, just as the rice seedling is established in this way, in dependence on its parts, so too the individual parts themselves, the upper and lower portions, the color and so on, are established in dependence on their basis of imputation, their parts, and the imputing terms and concepts. So if after dividing parts into parts in this way, you were to arrive at some microscopic particle, this particle, providing it has an identity, will certainly have multiple sides, such as east and west, and depend upon many other particles. So for this reason, consequentialists assert that it is impossible to have a partless, indivisible, solitary particle. So here again, as long as something is established as a particle, it must be established by way of imputing terms and concepts and the many parts that are the basis of imputation. So here, according to the consequentialist system, then the impossibility of a partless particle establishes all particles to be dependent arisings. So if it were the case that we had something like a rice seedling that existed independent of its being mentally designated by terms and concepts, then would have to exist in its own right. Or so too, if we were to find something, point to something like, say, a partless particle that exists in and of its own right, it would have to exist independently or in isolation, which is an impossible way for things to exist. And so too, if one is to try to assert that there are partless particles, there becomes the problem of how then would those particles aggregate? If you can't point to any one part or one side of that particle, then how is it going to touch with or meet with, connect to other particles in order to have an aggregation that creates the gross kind of world that we have? So anything, as long as something is a particle, it must be established by way of its imputing terms and concepts and the many parts that are its basis of imputation. So here establishing that the thing imputed is not its basis of imputation. And so too that there is, according to the Prasangika system, in the impossibility of a partless particle such that all all particles are established to be dependent arisings.
오야 주셔라. 오야. 오 다통다 저 강가 찍버려 봐. 당간주디 동반예세도 최치기 동반예 내주 거야고 신선은 탐제 찍버려. 지기 따보 강에 봐. 되니 건지 따보 예세라. 넬루타도지 최치기 등에 넬루타도도 거야고 지라서는 상마 찍버 찍냐래. 넬루타도는 담면져요 말이야. 최진 고라는 담면져요 얼도. 미래 라레 라마레 따레 싱다레 담면져요 얼데. 이 동배 차들이야 동당 동로대 집어야 되어라. 어디인데 최식이 돌려고 심부시는 강갈 집어래. 야 동반이 삼로 땅에 소소로 대보면은 동반이 삼로 마당에 들어라. 강산 가실이야. 당미 땜발에 다 여바 땜바데 야 요송세요도. 당미 땜바 많이 세 다도 강사들라. 다 땜바데 초도 주버래세. 그 체달 후에다 메대 연구에 송거라. 어디 기분 정기다 전부 녀모세야다 녀모 바샤다 제도 에네 공부 공부도 와. 가사담 수 있다면 기분 중도 라다 메고반 토발이야 동번이 그 공부도 와. 어디 손자 그 지기된도 야보지 자천안에 현다 가가 집어 인심 대하고 거라. 다한지나 풍부가요라 소부치도와 소불에 차셔망부요라 라바강바 나로다 제치로다 제베드 투템베 봄라 다창가 제메르지요라 소부들레 이때네 시스템지도가 소불에 때네 셈들로가 샤그라 소불에 때인데요래 단도 소부가 셈기 때치요래 그 네버 조선에 미 삼을 때가 마도 나라도 신도도 걸리걸리 재미 삼을 강가 연도교라 그 소보되게 셈기 땡치기요 말도 단단한 소보다 소보데 셈기 땡치기요라 뒤인데 넘버 10 미기 넘버 10 나의 넘버 10 내 넘버 10 제 넘버 10 류지 넘버 10 강가도와 미기하고 자와시기요라 당한 좀 미기듯이 로아시다 레스는 그 내가 맞으네 미기 넘버 10 형에게요 말아 그 망보질 때 되기요라 넘버 10째. 얘네 남셔 되게 단다 유초래게 소라 겜부도 와. 유 컨디션을 어디 하고도 뒤 하고 면도 참 소화대와 가시 동에게 가시 땅님께 되 소화신도 와. 유 컨디션 통해서나 되게 소소를 요즘에 패배수기 통해서나 대화 적고요 아래. 소소를 요즘에 내배수기 유등 연구도는 동해 적고요 아래. 소소를 요즘에 개발 매배수기 유등 또는 소화 땅님시고 알아. 이거 알아 시바나네 망쇼라다. 김쇼서라 가서티 소화도 연구하래. 유간데 알아서 따다 코란데 kum시왕 가래 김 양아래 가도 도어를 가도 텐데서 따땡 그릇이 돼요 알아. 근데 소화도 숙침시오지 알아. 초에 된다리 아니 지temba 초에다 계속 강가티 연구하래 대회 차진 주에 동행시에 뒤에 된다리야 녀다 강가 저바 강가 연구하라 초아 뒤도대 지다 미수最배 싫어지 차다기 싫어 되네 연구하라 도시 진도와 자원지 어디 지지를 샹데데 제가 때는 도시에도 매나니 그 소명에서도 차로라 어디 미래샤 어디 지금보다 디세븐 디지 약보르샤 디리 약보르면도 삼 도시에서도 와 어디지 풍부지라 딩아라서 망치와 쩌바 용야다 따위 돌로 쩌바 용야다 삼루탄다 담벤더샤네 요거라 도시부터 쩌바서 어디 들 삼루탄데 야만 너르르샤 근데 삼루탄데 양다버라 너르 마르샤 근데 삼루탄 도시라 소아본 도시가 아니 도시기 풍부시데 유레 셈버체바 유레바 셈버체베 레스그라텔레야 유레야 셈버체베 레다 대저 그 득들 녀모 공동가 제차도로서 대저리들 도시기 풍부시기도 다든다 차셔도 nga 요라 맞아 될 때네 네 다스 바타요래 풍부가부터 가루를 때네 실로는 바때네 망샤 소볼 때네 다더로 어떠시레샤 텐두레샤 미레샤 하다레샤 발라레샤 스타그도 아니 소소면에 바타고네 망샤데 초하다 어디른가 야고도 내 야고면도 삼라 삼루탄다 데 너르샤세 데 너르면도 세라 나게 시베찬에 바타고 망샤용도 어디 데 풍부가 유에데 풍부가 마도 메도 아티나 만도 계시 메도 다 텔레테네 빙가네 레르르네 다 마르스거라 소부 다이네 소부 차신 고다 강발라바르네 다이고른 다 마부쇼 차으라 소소래요 말에 샘데 다래요 말에 다 우메탱겨 루첸다 어디인데 풍부가라 때네 파 따봐 다시 뜬두 시리 미 가게덕네 따봐라 어디 따봐 잠게니 다이뭐 샤고래 탄예도 이제 저거래 때네 따봐 잠시기도 소보르지 구겨ገብ도네 칸에 지시 생기서 지시에도 넣고 추시에도 세다 전에 따봐라 대삼고 추시에 샤고라 다시 한게데 가반도 세트데 제요 말에 탄예도 유줄이 세번 마시셔라 한직내 탄예 유줄이 마다 마셔버 코란을 샤야다가 샤고래 지tembe 탄예데 세버 치기되는 니예요 말에 니 맨아니 지tembe 탄예 간거 시도래 매버 잘로래 야 뒤지 주나 로 재미있었어 안디가 말리스
So here, then when it comes to this kind of understanding, that when all phenomena are empty, and when we are able to realize this kind of truth, this reality in relationship to one phenomena, we can extend that then to understand it in relation to all different phenomena. So although conventionally things are different, we can talk about the horses and houses and humans and so forth. When one has come to understand that kind of the way in which phenomena don't have this kind of ultimate existence or are empty of that, we're able to sort of move that understanding from one thing to the next. But there are some people who, when hearing about emptiness, they fall into a kind of nihilist extreme, that there's absolutely no self. So it's not necessarily the teaching for everybody, especially right from the beginning. It's said that it's better for some individuals to hear about a self, to hear teachings on a self, if the alternative is them falling into some kind of nihilistic extreme where they deny karma and so forth, where they just think that nothing whatsoever exists. So, in order to be able to gain liberation from samsara, we absolutely have to understand emptiness to be able to get rid of our afflictions from their root and so forth. But just to gain a higher rebirth in the future as a human or a god, someone doesn't need to have the understanding of emptiness. So, for certain people where they are in the path, certain practitioners, it's actually better not to necessarily teach them selflessness or emptiness right from the beginning, because that then could be sort of a downfall for them. So when we come to sort of beginning to investigate in this way how it is that phenomena exist, when we say, for example, take the sort of human, take our person, we have a body, and most of the time we designate like, oh, that is so and so on the basis of that body. But we are not just our physical body. It's not as though the person is their body, but rather there's also the kind of mind, and our mind is constantly changing. Our consciousness, our six consciousnesses, use this body as a support. They sort of continue as long as that body continues, but it's not as though we can pick one of these things and identify it, point to it as being, oh, that is the person. And it goes beyond just the sort of aggregate of form and the aggregate of consciousness to those of feelings. When something appears to us in a way that is beneficial or helpful, that brings a feeling of happiness. When something appears threatening or somehow like it's going to be harmful, that brings about a feeling of suffering. And something towards which we are indifferent, we sort of give rise to this kind of ignorant or indifferent sort of feeling. And so examining then again this basis of designation of the self or the I, we come to the next of the aggregates, that is discernment or distinguishing. So here, when we have some kind of person, again, we're identifying the sort of most important elements. That is what composes the five aggregates. And here, then we have, after feeling, this kind of discernment, being able to sort of like distinguish, allows us to distinguish or identify things like this is this, as opposed to this is that. And so this kind of discernment or discrimination is another element of the kind of person. And then we have the sort of karma, the kind of karma that we have committed in the past, and the various kinds of afflictions that that karma arises from. So when we look at this sort of set of the five aggregates, these various things, we can see that independence upon designating a person on the five aggregates, we can speak about a person or an individual as self, but that's really the extent of their existence, that dependent designation, that sort of using terms and concepts in order to impute this is that, or like saying, oh, this is this person, that completes, it sort of culminates that level of existence. There is nothing beyond that. If we were to try to find within any of those individual parts something that we could point to and say, oh, that is the person, then they would have to exist in a way that it's not dependent or not sort of contingent upon anything. But when we try to engage in that kind of analysis, we can't actually find anything that exists in that way. We can't locate something that is beyond the sort of worldly term, that mere designation that we have given. So here, this when it comes to understanding emptiness, it really is about understanding the unfindability of this thing when we search for the imputed object within its basis of designation.
Cheba Chigio Marti, Chen Juden Tanya Tanda the Landu de Sede, Shatu Mari Sede, Chitan Jidegi Tanya Tanya Cheba Majisio Mara, Madu Mirachi Salarizilane, Tisuki, my Dr. Chen, Cheba Chegura, Chimgan Tuche, Dicare, Digare, Dimar, Tadi Reshase, Chalari Seguina, Marabadu said, Cheba Majisio Mara, Nizungune Kari Cheba Chegura. Chiracha de Trashis the Suina, Sahamagon, Tirin Mitra, the contrashi de Redas, oh, yeah, that Trashi de Bursa. That Trashi Kares, Chebachema, Trashi Mohako Sadra. Troops had that Trashi Kares, Chakadona, Dinye yo mare, tanye to dinye yo mare. Tene tak ba sam shaore. Ta khane ke sheg to ne tashi ki sheg do se. La ko na to ne tashi na de do se ora. Ani samba ki bu no o tashi tri ki bu de sha o tiren ko sem ki bu me do se ara. 풍부가 어디 자와치가 되게 그 야가다 누가 자와치데 뜻이 대화다 메대와치 소냥기 와라 어때쯤리야 샤고래 소란지네 타녀도 예배도 다도 티라 바데 어디 라차니 양자디 가르스 제요 말에 건주 공부도 가와이네서 요 공부들이 샤스 된거 차서 단지 살아 따단데 대용 공부 가게래서 되나니 미주 sembadevo 메두세라 sembadevo 메게서 다간 침버셔라 르버셔라 지금배 타녀들랑 참마송에 침버셔 다간 르버셔 인다 조사래 단 미디 공부장 주도 다 주도세 다 나가도세 때내 딱 보살을 샤고라 어디래 때내 딱 보삼래세데 당가란주 삼르 날 때요 말에 가란주 삼르 날 가셔야 돼요 가 풍부할 때네 딱 보삼이 대주 내가 쳐야 되네 다게 자가 제we 삼로 지금 말에 나랑 같이 요단다지 랑은에 랑주 투바치 따스바 제스바치 나 대여도 세르치 예배 나와셔기도 와 저 랑은에 주하지 마서 랑와도 줘 풍부단데서 딩에 서보라 딩에 셈라 딩에 서로 되는 상대 코란딜 로스페 로가이베서다 랑와제네 어딜이야 랑와도 주베요 삼가 삼루스가라 때내 딱베 삼루테 연에 때랑 삼루 랑원에 주베 삼루 숙천부 용면도 어디제 다 랑원에 연나서가라 랑원에 연나 다데 가서 랑와치네 딱가데레세 소고 셈다 소안 드신 말에 텔레 로스 요르베스나 텔레 로스 요 말와 다시는 랑와도 주베 다데 민도 아삼 교통바 공부하라 여기 다디 이마이 세대 타녀되베 다디 고 요거 쳐사래 탑때네 따고 삼로 여버도 여버 고쳐라 다가 저래 타녀도 요래 딱 나주 삼로 나래데 말을 라마도 랑은에 줘봐 랑경을 줘봐 랑경을 줘봐 나시 삼기와디 토네시 템바인 삼기와라 어디 템바 말을 다세 랑은에 줘봐 연나 딱 가반도세 따서고 소고데 말아 셈데 말아 소아 말아 두시 말아 다 텔레 로스 지요르선 텔레 로스 요 말바 텔리아테 동반이에스데 소소데 남주 소소 삼바나 신라 리그메도아 테 남주가 덴데 삼기어 따테 나시메도아 삼데 네 삼리아 네마나 신게 삼로 나진 숙첨부데 데 말바 테네 동반이에세 텐데 시셰도아 따테 나신 테사데 남주다 컴퓨터도 저저 삼을 돈데 딜레 레라도와 남도 저나 그 잘라 가서 마신 페이지 돈다 이기라 따르다 진담마다 치료 박바다 마신디 셔비지어라 저저 레레네 레디오 마르데 가서 하고 돈 남도 멤버 저저 속바데 레디오 마르 속발을 때는 남도 따고요 봐 속바데 닥시래 근데 저 관계 내가 챙게 필통게 대통게 마 대통 야자 통게 근데 챙게 자와 챙게 되라 초바된 게 양아 두줄 남도 스타기 알아 어디에 따티네시 따티레 로스 남도 지어르스네 요 말아 텔레 로스 로가 남도 지어 말아 로스 따텔레 때네 남도 맹다래 다 남도 페르기도 하세 남도 밥송 하세 남도 쇼바르지 께세 남도 께세도 하세 다가 샤오라 마도 라와도 가서 남도 시도치 자와생게 미세 코나 랑윈에 수 자와생게를 주에 삼고도 어때요 말와 때네 딱 봐서는 남도 샤고요도 랑윈에 주에 남도 주에 다 가들에서 제거라 딱도 제서라 얘는 남도 차셔르르네 말에 텔레로서요 말에 근데 라와도 주에 남도도 벤두섬 때네 딱 봐서는 남도 레샤서 어디 삼고거라 다 뒤치도 실었나
So here, if we begin to examine the conventional, the phenomenal, then it kind of breaks down. If we're searching for the sort of ultimate existence of something beyond it's being merely dependently imputed or dependently designated, then that kind of examination becomes problematic. We can't actually find the thing. But this isn't sort of saying to us that we shouldn't investigate things conventionally. Like, say someone steals something from you. It's not saying like, oh, well, don't investigate or examine that because there's no point to it. Rather, you should try to figure out who stole your thing, who maybe you go to the police or you search and you're able to find those sorts of things. Or if we are, like, say we don't know a particular person, and so we ask, well, who is Tashi? What are the sort of characteristics that Tashi has? That kind of level of conventional analysis and investigation is not is useful in on the level of the conventional. If we don't have the sort of sense of what Tashi looks like or who he is, then we can't identify him. We can't say, oh yeah, I've met Tashi or I've not or whatever. So it's when we then are searching beyond that kind of conventional level of existence, we're going beyond just saying like, oh, that person is talking or oh, that person is happy or whatever it is. And we're trying to find the kind of like essence or nature of that thing. We're going beyond that sort of conventional level of existence. We're not satisfied with things being mere imputations, but say, oh, I really want to find that thing that is designated. So again, this is something where the kind of investigation and analysis, if we don't investigate and analyze, then we can talk about conventions and that level of existence. But if one goes beyond that and wants to try to find that thing in the way that it appears to us, like things appear to exist from their own side. Like we have this sense when it comes to our own I or self in relation to these aggregates that there is like a self apart from these aggregates that is possessing like this is my form, my mind, my feelings, and so forth. And if we just acknowledge that that dependent designation is a mere designation, it's a dependently originated designation, and we're able to have that kind of level of understanding, our self-grasping will be dramatically reduced. So here, when it comes to what we're talking about in terms of meditating on emptiness, is really searching for, looking, when we begin to search for that thing which is designated and get to that level of unfindability. We've already established through that, like, again, conventional existence is a mere imputation, is a mere designation, and that satisfies that level of existence. We can talk about someone sort of coming and going, someone talking, someone being happy, and all of those kinds of things. But if you're not sort of satisfied with that, and instead think, well, where does that thing really exist? Where is it really? And try to point to it, that's when it becomes unfindable. There is nothing that exists in that way. So it becomes, we have so many options that we can contemplate in terms of trying to find the thing designated on its basis of designation that is this way of analyzing, looking into emptiness. Like, for example, we can take a plane, an airplane. There are all of these various parts. There's a whole accumulation, aggregation of parts that make up that plane. But when we search for, beyond the fact that it's able to, say, carry people here and there, it's able to fly in the sky, and we try to point to, well, where is it? What is that actual plane? And try to point to something within that collection of parts that exists as the plane. We can't find it. There's nothing there that we can point to that is really that airplane. But on a conventional level, we can speak about, oh yeah, I rode on a plane. I took a trip here and so forth. It's something that is a mere designation. But when we are not satisfied with that mere designation and try to go beyond that to try to find that thing that really exists in its own right or that exists beyond that level of mere designation, that's where we can't find it. And so in this way, we can meditate on emptiness through examining, through looking for that thing designated within its basis of designation, while still acknowledging that those mere designations can exist conventionally, and this kind of ultimate analysis is not negating their conventional existence. But when we go to the level of trying to find that thing so designated and are unable to find it, that is the kind of understanding of emptiness that we're being pointed to here.
Oh, yeah, that is one.
No.
This is also that is.
So we'll stop there for now as the time is up for today.
Oh, yeah.
May the spiritual teachers who lead me on the sacred path, and all spiritual friends who practice it have long lives. May I pacify completely all outer and inner hindrances. Grant such inspiration, I pray. May the lives of the venerable spiritual mentors be stable, and their virtuous actions spread in the 10 directions. May the light of Lobsang's teachings dispelling the darkness of the beings in the 3 worlds always increase. Idam Guru Ratna Mandala Kamiyatayami. Due to this merit, may we soon attain the awakened state of Guru Buddha, that we may be able to liberate all sentient beings from their suffering. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. Thank you so much, Gen Rinpoche,
Oh, yeah,
Tuchache.
that is.
Thank you, Katrina, for your very clear interpretation.
Oh, yeah, that's all.
Junta jema jema.
Let's all, let's all.
No.
Yeah, all this, that. All right.
And for those online, we'll see you next week. Record.